So how did you know Lynette, Linda?
I went to school with her. We went to school together.
Wow.
And we were all at that Halloween party. Gosh, there was hundreds of people. It was like at the end of this road, and I remember just seeing nothing but just people. There were so many people
At the Halloween party.
at the Halloween party. That was the last time we saw her.
Can you tell me a little bit about her? What kind of person she was?
To me, I think she was, to me, the way when I met her and stuff. I mean, I wasn't like, weren't friends that we hung out. We were friends at school. But to me, she kind of seemed quiet. And then I heard a story, and I don't know if it was from Laura or not, but I heard a story that one time, I don't know, she brought it. See, I don't want to say because I'm not 100% sure, but I don't know if I've heard a story about her bringing a knife to school that she was going to protect herself from somebody. But to me, I've always thought, when I think of her, I always thought of her as just a sweet, quiet type of girl.
Linda, you did hear that from me. It was the week of the murder. She took the butcher knife out of her kitchen, and her mother asked her why, and she said she was being bullied by some girls.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. High school was pretty bad as far as the bullying goes. And, there was definitely cliques in our school. You had your cheerleaders, and they were really snotty, and, the football players, and, there was definitely, there were cliques back then.
So, Laura, why don't you give me a little bit of background on how you found out about Linda and a little bit more about Lynette's story so that we can get people back up to speed, because not everyone knows exactly what happened to her and how integral she was into this case. So why don't you start with that?
Yeah. Lynette was going to Verdugo High School, which is where Linda was going. And she was working at McDonald's part-time after school. She was saving for a car in college. She lived with her mother and her little brother, who she was very, very close to. She almost didn't even go out on Halloween night because she wanted to stay home and take her little brother trick-or-treating. But her mother said, go have some fun. And she went out that night. It's really sad.
Mm-hmm.
She wore a gypsy costume that night. That's what she was before she changed back into her sweater. And it was actually, what's different about Lynette is this is the only victim that Bittaker and Norris knew prior to the abduction. So Bittaker used to go into the McDonald's and just gawk at her and stare at her. And her manager and all of her coworkers, testified at trial that he would just come in and stare at her and try to ask her out a million times. And she was 16 and was like, no, you're weird and you're 38.
Right.
But they remember him just coming in and literally just sitting at the table, just gawking at her.
So, Linda, you were at that Halloween party. Can you tell me what happened that night, Laura? Do you know what went on?
Okay, so the story that I heard, here was the story that I heard, is that she left the Halloween party. I think it was kind of earlier, and she left. She got a ride with some friends, and she lived. I'm trying to get. Hang on a second. She lived probably maybe a mile or two, if that, away from the corner of was it Radford? I'm trying to think of that street. Chevron Hills, California. There was a gas station there. Anyways, there was a gas station there. And all the people, whoever took her home, all they had to do was make a left turn at that signal. And that signal on the other side of the street, I believe was Wheatland, I want to say. Instead of them taking her home, they dropped her off at that gas station. And then she saw Bittaker and Norris there, recognized them is what I'm now hearing, and agreed to get in the car with them. Okay, here we go. Sunland, Tuxford. I'm trying to find that street. There's Rise and Shine. Okay, there's...
And Linda, you're friends with one of the guys who found Lynette the next day, right?
Yes. So, okay, my friend Ross Perez lived across the street from where Lynette was found. And Mrs. Grayboys is the one that found her in the bushes. And then Kathy, I know I gave you that name. She's got the yellow house. It was right across the street from her house is where she was found in the bushes. Kathy.
I'd have to look it up, but I know who you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was Mrs. Gray Boyles. She was the one. She was driving the bus
No, she
that
was
morning.
jogging. She was on a jog.
One of them, well, they all thought initially they had walked by Lynette's body and thought it was a mannequin from Halloween.
Right.
So, Laura, what do you think happened? I mean, she went into the car with her friends. They were going to take her home. She went to the gas station instead, and then Laura Bittaker and Norris picked her up.
Well, I'll go into the police discovery and the court transcripts and how I started going one by one. But the first thing that didn't make sense to me, well, first of all, in the case, like leaving her at the gas station, they're like a mile down from her house. I always thought that was very strange. And then the second part was I asked Linda and Lisa, another friend of Lynette's, did she ever do any kind of like hard drugs?
I never saw her, I knew the people that, did drugs at school. Yeah, I mean, everybody knows who everybody was at school. And I never saw her do any drugs.
Yeah, you said like if she went to the party, she would just be like maybe having a beer and smoking some pot, but nothing.
Yeah, there was nothing. Absolutely.
Yeah. So when I looked at the toxicology, it just didn't add up because she was such a good student and she's working hard. She's always taking care of her little brother. And I'm looking at the toxicology report and it says PCP, barbiturates, and alcohol. And just mixing 2 of those would be very dangerous, let alone 3.
Right.
And the barbiturates could have been placed into a beer and the PCP could have been easily put into a joint.
Right. Yeah, that's true. And who knows if it was slipped at the party or if they had given it to her. It's kind of a weird thing, and of course they're not going to say. They're not. No. I don't think Norris and Bittaker they probably never admitted that they drugged her.
So whose Halloween party was it? A friend, like a group of people from high school just had a Halloween party?
It was actually, these Halloween parties, we would go to, or not, not specifically a Halloween party. Back then, there were a lot of parties that you would just show up at and you had no clue who was throwing it. Mm-hmm. You didn't have any clue. And what's weird is one of my girlfriends, Vicky, that I've known forever, she said that she was part of that Halloween party, that she threw it, but I never remembered her doing that. I just don't remember that. But I know it was at the end of Wentworth Street, Ora Vista and Wentworth in Sunland. So
Laura, when you went through the police discovery, what did you uncover that you found interesting about this, and what wasn't making sense?
Well, a lot. And let's see, the first thing was barbiturates and PCP was found inside Bittaker's motel room 3 weeks later, the same drugs that were in her system. But even more than that is, Linda, don't say their names. I know we've talked about privately, just don't say it while we're recording. Uh-huh. I asked you about the brother and the sister who drove her home, and I asked Lisa, and you guys didn't know their names or have... No, I didn't know their names, and I don't think they wanted, afterwards, I don't think they wanted to admit it. And did you check? They're not students of Verdugo, right? I think you checked and looked. Yeah, and I don't believe they were. Yeah, I don't believe that they were students. It's kind of funny. I just looked it up because it was at the end of the road at Wentworth. I just sent you a picture. Oh, yeah. So Cindy and Rob, I know you guys are catching up to the story. This brother and this sister who drove Lynette home, but nobody knows who they are. They didn't go to Verdugo High School. In the police discovery, I find out that they're actually very close to Bittaker and Norris and hung out at the Scott Motel every day. And they were hanging out with Bittaker and Norris right before the party. That is weird. I never heard that. That is a first.
Do you think they were trolling for Bittaker and Norris?
Well, I think what happened was, because there was 5 other girls there too, I think the girls were just smoking and drinking at the Scott Motel, and I think they started talking about Lynette, and I think Bittaker just got the idea of like, hey, you know what, it's Halloween, why don't we do this? You put this in her joint, put this in her drink, and Norris and I will pick her up and we'll scare her. And the girls probably thought it was funny and it was a prank gone wrong. That's what I think happened. Is she started carrying the knife in her purse because she was bullied that week. It was that week she was like scared of a group of girls.
So, I mean, It sounds a little bit like Bittaker and Norris, because they were partying with these kids. They got them to do what they wanted.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, probably so. I would believe it. Back then, kids would do anything for drugs.
So this poor young girl was being harassed by these girls at school who you think were partying with Bittaker and Norris, so they might have basically led her to them.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I don't know how, and I asked, the people in law enforcement how this was missed, how these two, this brother and sister, were partying with Bittaker and Norris right before the Halloween party in the van with them. And then suddenly Lynette Ledford gets dropped off by them, but nobody knows who they are. They don't go to Verdugo High School, a mile away from her house, so she has to walk down this one street from the gas station.
Mm-hmm.
Like, nobody looked into that prior.
And no one spoke to these two people?
We never heard anything about it. We all thought it was weird. It was like going, how could a friend, this was everybody was talking at school going, how could somebody do that? All they had to do was turn left and go 1 mile. What made them say, I don't feel like making a left turn. I'm just going to drop you off here at the gas station and you can walk the rest of the way home.
Doesn't make sense.
It was late at night, and we've never figured that out. Never.
Where are these two people now, this brother and sister?
The brother died a couple years ago, and I just talked to their little brother. I made contact with him and his wife. Weirdly enough, both of their parents worked at San Luis Obispo, a men's colony where Bittaker and Norris met.
Oh my gosh.
Which is even weirder. Yeah.
At the same time or at different times?
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, the dad retired as a sergeant from there. Very weird.
That is very weird.
Very
and
weird.
then their kids...
And then their kids were hanging out
with Bittaker and Norris at the Scott Motel?
Is that just mere coincidence, or is that just kind of... I don't know what to say.
I don't know. I think it's a coincidence unless somehow they were working in the unit Bittaker and Norris were at.
Because I don't know if a parent would, if they knew something like that, and they go, oh yeah, you're hanging out with who? These two guys that were in that jail or prison?
Well, the little brother tried to get his parents on the phone with me and his sister. They wouldn't talk to me.
Mm-hmm.
But then there was all these other kids that were going to this motel, and hanging out with him.
See, and that's the thing. Okay, so Scott Motel was in Burbank, and it was pretty close to Burbank High. And so that's why, I'd never go to Burbank. I mean, my grandparents lived in Burbank at the time, but I don't remember, anything like that of, hanging out. If somebody, hey, if you go to Scott Motel, you could hang out over here. We never heard any of that.
Laura, do you think that he was using a lot of those kids to troll for him?
Yeah, I mean, with Lynette, I definitely think so. I don't think he was actively sending them out to acquire victims or anything like that or troll for him. But I think he sees the opportunity he saw on Halloween night. And, I've reached out to every witness on this case, and the 6 girls that were there, right, hanging out at the Scott Motel when this was happening, when this plan could have been, concocted, not a single one will speak to me of the 6.
Not a single one of them?
No. Not even one. Even one of the daughters got really excited who loves true crime and even tried to talk her mother into talking to me, and she wouldn't do it.
Why do you think so?
I really think, if you look at our past episodes that we recorded, there's this underlying theme of destroying innocence. That's what Bittaker always wanted to do, destroy the innocence. The squirt guns with the acid. He wanted to victimize as many people as he could, especially, innocent children. So this is the one, Lynette was the one he left on an ivy bed, in between Verdugo and Burbank High School. So all the kids would know what happened to her. This was a way to victimize all these kids.
Well, I feel like there's something with the brother and sister that's suspicious, as well as with their parents.
Well, I think it's interesting the fact that all these other people that you tried to contact, that they don't want to talk anything about it.
Yeah,
and
they don't want to talk. And the brother was one of the only visitors that Bittaker had after he was arrested.
So he went and visited him in prison?
Yeah.
That's kind of interesting.
Uh-huh.
After the fact?
After the fact, yeah.
And then this person was never were they questioned by the police?
They were both, questioned by the police, and they both testified in court.
Mm-hmm. They testified against Bittaker and Norris?
Yeah,
or they
against them.
Oh, okay. All right, so they probably cut some sort of deal.
But then he went to visit him?
Yeah.
And what did he sell him?
It doesn't say. It just had it just has a list of visitors for Bittaker, and he was one of them.
How soon after? How soon after?
Pretty soon after. I want to say the first couple months he was going in. I mean, yeah.
It's bizarre. There's something not right with that.
Yeah. I don't understand when I asked, the district attorney's office, you have a brother and a sister. Their parents worked at San Luis Obispo, which is just weird. And, they're hanging out with Bittaker Norris at the Scott Motel in the van, then they're the ones who dropped Lynette off. Why wasn't this looked at or questioned back in 79?
And what did he say?
That must have been an oversight.
Huh.
Yeah, for them it's a done deal, so they're not going to go back.
Yeah.
They don't speculate on stuff that they've already gotten convictions on.
But it is suspicious, and it's possible that that brother and sister might have known about other things.
Yeah, I would probably say yeah, because Bittaker was playing, the Jackie Gilliam tape to the teenagers and showing a lot of pictures.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very, very possible they've seen some other stuff.
I mean, it's very Manson-ish.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like he was taking these young people and indoctrinating them by letting them party with him and giving them drugs and probably getting them alcohol, and it was probably the party place where they can do whatever they want, and then he used that to manipulate them to do things for him, whether or not they even, unbeknownst to them, that they were basically trolling for him. But this brother and sister is strange, because the fact that their parents worked at the place where both those guys were at in San Luis Obispo, and then they connect with them when they get out in Burbank. I mean, to me, that's not a coincidence.
Mm-mm.
If it is a coincidence, a really, really strange coincidence. But I think it's highly unlikely that it is. And Bittaker never told you anything about those two?
No, he said, you'll find out. He always wanted me to go back and do the investigation and figure it out and come back to him. And this was one I got after he died. It was when I read the court transcripts right after he died. I saw this 2 names for the people who had dropped her off. And I was like, oh my God, that's the same people from the Halloween night at the Scott Motel.
And then what happened to his brother, the guy that dropped her off?
Well, I was talking to the little brother of both of them. He was too young to be hanging out at the Scott Motel, but he knew about Bittaker and Norris. They had talked about it in the family and stuff. And he just said he had talked to his parents and his sister trying to get them to talk to me. And he killed himself right before the Toolbox Killer aired.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Did he know it was coming on?
He did.
Sounds like a guilty conscience.
Mm-hmm. Something's not right there.
Yeah.
How old was he when he killed himself? So that's just recently. It's only last year, right?
Yeah, it was September.
God, if they were my age, because I'm going to be 60, so...
Yeah, probably 50s then.
Yeah. Late 50s, yeah.
Yeah, well, I have a story about the tape. Actually, Linda, I don't even think I've told you this one. The tape was one of the left in the van when Bittaker buried everything, and it wasn't found initially. It was found later on. They had to get a warrant for the van specifically. Paul Bynum and Tom Cray, the lead investigators from Hermosa, listened to one part of the tape, and it was just Bittaker talking to his accountant. And it was a Burbank police officer who actually took the tape and turned it over and listened to the whole tape. It was almost missed completely. And that's when he discovered the Ledford tape. And it hit him so hard because he found out that there were pictures of his son's girlfriend, who was a member of his family. And they were actually hunting his son's girlfriend. And he had to listen to the tape thinking about her when he first heard it.
Wow.
There's actually multiple reports from other inmates that talk about this incident at Knott's Berry Farm, where Bittaker said there's actually a third party with them at Knott's Berry Farm, and Bittaker and the third party were laughing, telling Norris she's dead and you're still having sex with her and laughing.
And this victim has never been found.
No, she's never been found.
And you don't know her name?
No, I've been searching.
No, I don't.
It's terrible.
Well, to be honest with you, Rob, it was kind of like the police. When I was interviewed, when it came to light that, Bittaker had been talking to me and I was interviewed by one of the detectives, I explained the story. I repeated the story to them, and they said, well, look into it. And in the next interview or so on, after a few days, I'd either call them or they had come down, and I asked them, was there any facts or validity to this woman from Knott's Berry Farm? And the answer was, I don't want to say something that's not true or accurate. It was like we took notes on what you said. We haven't been able to find a missing person or a report from Knott's Berry Farm. So it kind of just fell by the wayside.
And I just want to read all three of you something from the police discovery. This is from the report when Joe Jackson went to authorities about Bittaker and Norris. And this is from Paul Bynum, the lead detective on the case. This is from his notes on that meeting with Jackson that day. He met with him.
And who is Jackson again? Remind people who Jackson is.
Joe Jackson is the one who turned Bittaker and Norris in. He had met Norris way back when they were in Tuscadero. He's also a serial rapist like Norris. And they also were all housed in D Block in CMC East. and they all got out around the same time, moved to Los Angeles. But this was from Paul's notes. Paul pretty much asked Jackson, why is he coming forward and telling him all this stuff? And the first thing that Jackson told Paul was there was 6 murders. And he said, when I go talk to Bittaker and Norris, what are they going to tell me about you? And Jackson states, they're going to tell you I was involved in a Knott's Berry Farm murder, but it's bullshit. And then the interview ends.
Interesting.
Do you think he was?
I don't know. I mean, all the reports from Los Angeles County say there was a third person there. Anthony, you could speak more to that. Do you remember Bittaker talking about a third person?
I do vaguely, and they just never pursued it as far as being an actual case or having evidence to pursue it. But Bittaker had mentioned there was a victim from the Knott's Berry Farm.
And Joe Jackson was working with Bittaker and Norris for a period of time.
We know he was trolling with them because he was arrested in Santa Monica with Norris, prowling the neighborhood with like stockings over their head, looking for a victim to rape, so they were arrested, got right out, on bail. And I know Jackson would go with them to Redondo Pier, the Hermosa Strand, and photograph the girls as well. And I tracked down a witness. So the woman who was working for the police department who ran that plate for Bittaker, she had 4 daughters, and Bittaker was obsessed with one of her daughters. And we know that when I talked to the girls, Bittaker and Norris had taken these girls to Knott's Berry Farm without the mother, and the girls had begged the mother. Bittaker and Norris really creeped them out, and Bittaker had touched one of the girls, and the mother still let them around her children. It's a really sick story. But the youngest girl, Elizabeth, I spoke to, she just passed away, but I had one interview with her before she did pass away, and she remembers Bittaker and Norris leaving to go to Knott's Berry Farm and meeting a third guy. And I said, Elizabeth, if I showed you a picture, would you remember who this third guy was? Because she said she only remembered him by his nickname, and his nickname was Red. And I sent her some pictures, and she said, that's him.
And who was it?
Jackson.
Where is he now?
Oregon.
So he's not, is he in prison?
No.
So there was no follow-up on that?
No follow-up. I contacted Tom Cray, who was Paul Bynum's partner. They were the lead investigators on the Bittaker-Norris case out of Hermosa Beach. So when I contacted Tom, I had told him about Knott's Berry Farm, and he was shocked. He was very shocked because he had not seen the reports from the jailhouse, and his partner Paul had never told him what Jackson told him in that first interview. Tom Cray was off that day, so Paul went alone to interview Jackson, but Paul never told Tom, for whatever reason, that Jackson said, they're going to tell you about a Knott's Berry Farm, but it's all bullshit. Tom was shocked when I told him, and I said, Tom, I'm looking over the evidence list that was collected at Norris's, and it says right in the evidence list, Knott's Berry Farm tickets were taken into evidence. I go, is there any way to find out a date on those Knott's Berry Farm tickets? Tom goes, I'm going to call Hermosa PD to see if I can get the evidence out for you. So Tom called Hermosa PD trying to get the evidence out to get me the dates on those ticket stubs of Knott's Berry Farm. But the evidence had been transferred to the sheriff's department.
So now they have it.
They have it, yeah.
And you don't have that.
And Tom couldn't get it out from the sheriff. We can try. I've been trying. Yeah.
Okay.
This was a victim Bittaker actually spoke to me about, and Jason, who was the PI on his case, who we spoke with, he remembers her too. There's a lot of mentions of this girl, Gretchen, and she was a young blonde. Bittaker met her at a gas station and wrote down her license plate and tried to follow her around. And at the time, Norris had a friend who was working for the police, and Bittaker called her and said, can you run this plate for me? I accidentally hit her and I drove away and I feel so bad, and I'm on parole and I just want to send her the money. So she ran the plate, and it came back, her address came back to the Church of Scientology. And that's when him and Norris started going to the Church of Scientology, and they found her, and they even went inside and tried to even join the church, and they tried to tap the phone lines of the Church of Scientology to find out her address and more information about her. They hunted this girl very hard. All I have is a first name, Gretchen, and I know she was blonde, blue-eyed, young, was part of the Church of Scientology, but there's no last name mention about her. I've tried to contact the church just to see if they had a girl named Gretchen around that time. It says she was a teacher there, a teacher of ethics, but I cannot find her last name, and I don't know if she's alive or not.
Let's just talk about the tape for a second, because the tape is just so disturbing to me. I mean, I think
I've heard 30 seconds of it, and, listening to how Anthony reacted when he was recalling it, I have that same visceral reaction. Thinking back to that 30-second clip, it feels like someone is reaching down inside of you and just squeezing your intestines. It's to hear her screams, just bone-chilling, blood-curdling screams, and you hear him hitting her, and you just hear the torture and just how badly she's just screaming, you know, and you know she's being killed, and it's even
That's
30
awful.
seconds, like I couldn't even go on.
And those tapes were recovered from his van?
Yeah, that was the only one recovered. The rest of them, like he took tapes of Jackie Gilliam. He told me privately he took some stuff of Andrea Hall and Cindy too. There was a lot of audio tapes. And then Christina was one of the witnesses who came forward who said she heard the 12 to 13 different girls screaming, which I've labeled the scream tape that Dina Moody said she saw under the fridge. They were buried. Whitaker buried most of the evidence because he got tipped off the cops were at Norris's place. And that's the buried evidence that has never been recovered.
Mm-hmm.